Welcome to Science with Soul. I'm Dr. Lottie Valentine and the host of this program. I'm a physician, evidential psychic medium, international keynote speaker, and the author of Med School After Menopause, The Journey of My Soul. This podcast was inspired by events from my own life, and as I have journeyed through life, it has taught me that we're part of a greater divine web of interconnectedness. I have walked the path of illness, healing, and transformation, and after experiencing 2 near-death experiences, I became clairvoyant, clairaudient, and clairsentient, and I was guided to attend medical school at the age of 54. In this podcast, we will meet many different types of doctors, healers, spiritual leaders, educators, and other interesting souls. And it is my hope that you will. Welcome to Science with Soul. I'm Dr. Lottie and the host of this podcast. Today, I'm so excited to introduce P.M.H. Atwater L.H.D. for a third interview. If you have not listened to the first 2 interviews, make sure to find them and go listen to those as well. Today, P.M.H. will be talking about her book, Dying to Know You, Proof of God in the Near-Death Experience. P.M.H. is one of the original researchers in the field of near-death studies, having begun her work in 1978. She has written 18 books on the subject of near-death experiences. Near-death experiences, the rest of the story, wraps up her early work with nearly 5,000 adult and child experiencers of near-death states, while further exploring her theory about transformations of consciousness, a theory she first began to investigate in 1966 back in her home state of Idaho. Some of her findings in the near-death field have been verified in clinical studies, among them the prospective study done in Holland and published in the Lancet Medical Journal 12/15/01. The big book of near-death experiences brought the entire field of near-death studies up to date worldwide and was featured in an online version of Newsweek magazine. The New Children and Near-Death States, along with the Forever Angels, Near-Death States in Childhood and Their Lifelong Impact, turns around what we thought we knew about child experiencers. Dying to Know You, Proof of God in the Near-Death Experience, stands alone as a summary of thousands of experiencer voices, their words, their truth, their wisdom, the People's Book. In 2005, she was awarded the Outstanding Service Award for the International Association for Near-Death Studies, IANS, and the Lifetime Achievement Award for the National Association of Transpersonal Hypnotherapists, as well as an honorary Ph.D. from a school in Sri Lanka. In 2010, she was also awarded the Nancy E. Bush Award for Literary Excellence and the Lifetime Achievement and Special Services Award, both from IANS. She has presented her findings for many organizations and schools, including twice at the United Nations and as a guest on such TV shows as Heraldo, Regis and Kathie Lee, Larry King Live, Jessy Raphael, and Entertainment Tonight. She has been a guest on hundreds of radio shows, including several with George Noory and one with Art Bell. Her books have been published in over 12 countries. In April 2018, she won the 2017 Silver Nautilus Award in honor of her recent book, A Manual for Developing Humans, for offering a potent and powerful message for today's world. A generational researcher as well, she summarized the changes now occurring in the human race in Children of the Fifth World, a guide to the coming changes in human consciousness and beyond the indigo children. Her own story as an experiencer of near-death states, I Died 3 Times in 1977, the complete story, is available at Amazon. She became a researcher in the field of near-death studies because of what she was told to do during her 3rd near-death experience by a voice she came to call the voice like none other. That voice also told her to write 3 specific books. The first was not named, but could have been Coming Back to Life. The second is Future Memory. And the third, A Manual for Developing Humans, which recently won the Silver Nautilus Award. A prayer chaplain, visionary counselor, wife, mother, grandmother, great grandmother. Her website is filled with many services and features, among them the marketplace, where near death experiencers and those like them can promote their product and services without charge. Her monthly newsletters are free, and you can sign up at www.pmhatwater.com. Welcome, PMH. I am so delighted to have you back on the show, and I can't wait for you to share information about your book, Dying to Know You, Proof of God in the Near-Death Experience.
Well, that's the people's book. It's not a researcher's book. It's not a book of my findings. No, not at all. It's sort of a compilation of voices of all the many adults and children that I've researched over the decades. I've been doing this for 43 years.
Right.
So these are a lot of voices that have spoken, and I just kept track and wrote them down. And but this is really funny. I never meant for this to be a book. Please know, I was just collecting these voices. Didn't have any knowledge or thought about what I was going to do with them. And one day I was traveling in an airplane from where I live to go to Sacramento, California. I was going to give a number of talks there. Excuse me. And while I'm seated in the plane, what do you do when you're sitting in a plane? You're minding your own business. Maybe you're napping, maybe you're reading a book. And I'm just sitting in an airplane. I mean, what do people do when they're sitting in an airplane? I mean, you nap, you might read a book. I'm just sitting there staring into space. And all of a sudden, in front of me, literally in front of my nose, a book starts to write itself. I mean, here it is, suspended in air, a book, and it's writing itself. Page after page after page, it's just writing itself. And I thought, well, maybe I'm snoozing, maybe I'm having a dream. So I didn't pay any attention to it. And it just kept writing and writing. And after a little while, I got to thinking, well, maybe I ought to pay attention to this. What is it writing? What's happening here? I can poke my fingers into the air. Can I get rid of this? Is it a hallucination? I couldn't get rid of this. It just kept writing. And I began to notice that it had something to do with dying to know you, and it had something to do with God. It's like dying to know God or something like that. And I would get the frontispiece, then I would get the table of contents, and then it would just simply start writing the book. And it would do it like a broken record, over and over and over. After a while, I got to thinking, well, maybe I should pull out a pencil and paper and write this down. So I pulled out my notepad and my pen and started writing it down. Well, we landed in Sacramento, and then the busyness, and my son was there to pick me up, and we went to the first place I was to give a talk. And anytime I was quiet, that book would start up again, writing itself, to the point that it was an absolute nuisance. And I was getting to be a little bit angry. It was getting in the way of the talks I was giving, the people I was talking to, the exchange of information. It was just getting in the way. And after a couple of talks, I had a friend of mine, Mellon Thomas Benedict, a fellow researcher, a fellow experiencer. And he took me down to see the sequoias. And on the way down there, we happened to pass through a little town called Floyd, Floyd, California. And it's an odd, funny little town. They even have um, a museum for Sasquatch. That's how,
Mhm.
how clever this is. And they had this one very quiet, silent, beautiful kind of new low to the ground building. And on the street there was this sign saying, that this was a Greek Orthodox church. Well, I happen to love Greek Orthodox churches because I love the iconography and all the stuff inside. So we parked. I went inside the church, and and nobody was there. I was looking around at the saints, and and all the points of prayer, and I just decided, maybe I could get some help here. So I got down on my hands and knees, my forehead to the ground, and I asked for help. Please help me. What's going on here? And I heard this grandfatherly voice, and it said, "Hush, child. Hush, child. Now, do your work." That was it. So I thought, well, obviously, I'm supposed to write this book. So I started in, and it's a book about allowing the people to be people, allowing the child and adult near-death experiencers to just simply talk, to speak their truth, what they saw, how it affected them, what their opinions are. And the more I got into it, the more I thought, there's no other book like this on the market anywhere in the world. None. You've got researchers talking about their experience. You've got an experiencer talking about their experience. You've got all these different viewpoints. But nowhere can you find a book that summarizes the people's voices. I mean, it doesn't exist. So I just gave in, and so we now have the book Dying to Know You, Proof of God in the Near-Death Experience. My editor changed, tweaked the title a little bit, but that's okay. So we've got all these people. and that's what I would like to share with you is what's in the book. And it's the people talking about how they view it. And the majority, child or adult, but mostly adults, look at it as a sense of mission somehow. It's like they didn't have this experience for nothing. There seemed to be a purpose for it. And they feel this sense they've got to talk about it. Even if it's on the rooftop, they want to be on the rooftop and say to the world, God is, death isn't. And, I have to remind, I have to keep reminding these people during my research that, don't forget the first rule of discipleship. You don't freak the natives. If you're up on the rooftop saying God is, death isn't, they're going to haul you off to the funny farm. So it's the idea of learning how to share, and that takes some time. And what they want to share, and hold on, everybody, what they want to share is 90 to 95% say, yes, there is a God. Absolutely yes to God. So we're talking here nearly 5,000 people. Yes, there is a God. But they don't look at that God necessarily as the average churchgoer. It's the idea of God, Allah, deity. It doesn't matter whether you call God Allah. It doesn't matter if you call God something else, or the Father upstairs, or if you call it the One or the Force. Doesn't matter what you call God. God is still God. And I found in my work of interest here that even the atheists come back. You know, there's an atheist church and there are atheist ministers. There really are. and several atheist ministers that I had the privilege of talking to, they are so full and filled with love, and they talk just like any other near-death experiencer. And they of course avoid the word God, but they use words that signify, yes, there is a force of some kind, and yes, that force seems to be a creator vibration, or a creator entity, or somehow there's something else in charge of this world besides you and me and the gatepost. So it's this idea. Near-death experiencers talk very much about this idea that there is a new gospel, and that whether you're talking about people who have a very transformational spiritual experience, Kundalini experience, certainly a near-death experience, from that, coming from that, is a new gospel for the whole world. It is the gospel of forgiveness and compassion. So very much anybody, anywhere can pick up on this gospel. You know, is God the same as typical religion? Well, some people say yes, some people say no. But listen to the fumbles. Maleness comes out as a habit phrase. If they're going to talk about he or him, that's a habit phrase. It has nothing to do with who they saw or what they saw or how their feelings about God is. It's like the God of the near-death experience is bigger than the God of Holy Writ. So, you know, we're looking at a very huge, expanded view of who or what God is. And that God, the God of the spiritual experience or the near-death experience, is a huge, massively huge, big sense of allness. To a child, God is always a father figure. Sorry, you know, you're not gonna get any kid that comes up with a mama figure or an auntie or any of that kind of stuff. Kids come up with father figures, or some kind of benign kind of, you know, bisexual or not, you know, not how we would name that kind of figure, male or female. But for most children, God is a father figure. But it's really it's really interesting. All these years that I've worked with kids will invariably challenge God. Whoever they see as being that God figure or that father figure, whoever that is, they'll challenge that figure. They'll go right up. I mean, you know, kids are kids. They just go right up and they say, is this what you really look like? And invariably, I haven't run across an exception yet. There might be one, but I haven't run across it. Invariably, that father figure will go poof and become this huge, massive light. It loses all sense of form, maleness, femaleness, all sense of form. It becomes this massive light. It's sort of like, you know, adults might call it the light of enlightenment. but it's the idea that if you're going to talk about God, what you're really talking about is a light or a movement of light or a movement of force, even beyond what we can conceptualize as a force or as a light. I know a lot of people today are calling the near-death experience a white light experience. No, 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 no. It's a bright light experience. You know, and some adults, when they talk about being in this particular light, they say it is stronger, bigger, more powerful than 10,000 suns. Instantly you're fried, but there's no pain. You know, can you imagine that? It's just like massive light, incredible kind of light. And I'd like to read this for you from the book, because they're talking about God and being bathed in the light on the other side of death, and it's more than life changing. And of course, many of the experiencers come back with different names for God. They don't necessarily call it God. They call it source or core, or light or presence. They all, you know, the creator. They have all kinds of names. But this is from the book itself. That light is the very essence, the heart and soul, the all-consuming consummation of ecstatic ecstasy. It is indeed a million suns of compressed love, dissolving everything unto itself, annihilating thought and cell, vaporizing humanness and history, unto the one great brilliance of all that is, and all that will ever be, and all that ever was. You know the light is God. No one has to tell you, you know. And you can no longer believe in God afterward, for belief implies doubt. There is no more doubt, none. You now know God, and you know that you know, and you're never the same again. And you know who you are, a child of God, a cell in the greater body, an extension of the one force, an expression from the one mind. No more can you forget your identity, or deny, or ignore, or pretend it away. There is one, and you are of the one. One. The light does this to you. It cradles your soul in the heart of its pulse beat and fills you with love shine. And you melt away as the you think you are, reforming as the you really are. And you are reborn because at last you remember. God is without gender. God as a nameless present, existent beyond what words can tell, a conscious intelligence and creative principle so great that it envelops and permeates all levels, all things, all possibilities, all potential, all aspects of creation, all belief systems. It's like, just hang with that for a moment. Yeah, just hang with that. That is so powerful. And that sums it. And these people, they talk about soul. And they all agree, yes, we have one. I haven't heard one yet that disagrees. I'm sure they're out there, I just haven't heard them yet. And although the curriculum of life is writ over there, carrying out that curriculum and developing it, developing the muscles needed to fulfill it, all of that is done here in a body on the earth plane. This is what we're for. Our soul is what keeps us on track. We're here to play out the plan or play out whatever it is that is best for us to do, to take part in whatever is occurring here to whatever degree we can, but it's our soul that keeps us on track. And the quickest way to access soul wisdom is through meditation or prayer, the idea of silence, just silence. And they all agree we are larger outside of our body than inside our body. We move from little to larger at crossover. Once you are not in your body, that is to say you've died, or maybe you're in deep meditation, it's like the soul takes over. And the soul possesses voltage strength. It has a field to its potential. You know, Lottie, this is something that a lot of people over time have talked about, including Thomas Edison. What about the soul? How real is the soul? Can we prove that there's a soul in the body? You know, in the 1900s, Dr. Duncan McDougall had a particular test he performed in hospitals with those people who are about to die. And he would put them, with their permission, of course, on a huge measuring weight table. And then he would take their weight, you know, as they're still alive. And then after they've died, he'd weigh them again. And there was always a difference of about 1/2 to 3/4 of an ounce, sometimes a full ounce. And that's not very much. We think, well, okay, you know, so you lose an ounce of your weight at death. I mean, it's like big deal. The soul weighs an ounce, maybe 1/2 an ounce, big deal. But the interesting thing is, if we look today at computers and what the different microchips weigh, they don't even weigh 1/2 an ounce. They're just so light. And look at how much material and information one of those little bitty teeny weeny computer chips can carry. It's just, I mean, it just blows your mind at how much material and information a little bitty tiny computer chip can hold. So the idea then that the soul might weigh 1/2 an ounce, 3/4 an ounce, maybe an ounce, you know, it's like, wow, that's probably a whole lot of information. And later on, about six years after Dr. Duncan McDougall did his tests, there were a number of docs at a Massachusetts hospital who did the same thing and had the same result. And this is about the time of Thomas Edison. He was convinced that the soul is made up of what he calls life units, which is microscopic particles, sort of similar probably to those microchips. But he died before he could complete the machine he was building to detect them. But he was absolutely convinced that all of this, when we're talking about the soul, all of this is voltage. It's voltage strength, voltage meters. And if you ever had spare time, maybe some people in your listening audience have, that on TV, maybe the radio, and they tune into some of these shows, you know, ghost hunters of today, they always have voltage meters. And that's how they can tell if there's a ghost in the house or in the basement or wherever. They're going for the voltage. And they come from a long line of people who were convinced, yes, this idea of voltage strength. And there's another thing people talked about, Dr. Lottie. There's another thing they talked about, and that is breathing. And it's like everything breathes. And we think, well, our nose does, our lungs do. Yeah, we're breathing. No, everything breathes, whether it has a nose or not. And after you die, one of the most common things people convey back to their loved ones or their friends is that the universe, wherever they are, there's still breath. They're still breathing. And we get this also from soldiers in combat, and they talk about, on the other side, and the beings on the other side are breathing. And it's like the whole universe and all of creation is breathing. And it's like, it's not like our nose does. That's what it's one of the ways I deal with children, because children are just, the little kid is going to tell you right to your face, well, it doesn't breathe like our nose does, but there's breath, the idea of off and on and off and on, the idea of breath. But the universe doesn't breathe like our nose does. And it's a sweep of discovery. It's as if, and so many talk about this undulating, as if wave-like, sometimes flashing or sparkling self or power grid or circuit board of energetic light particles. That is the spirit of us. That is the breath of us. This flashing or sparkling power grid or circuit board of energetic light particles. So, when we talk about Holy Spirit, in the Course in Miracles talks about Holy Spirit. The Bible, the different types of holy books talk about Holy Spirit. New Agers talk about it. Spiritual people talk about it. Holy Spirit. They don't know what Holy Spirit means. If you go back to the antecedent of Holy Spirit, it literally means the breath of God breathing. So you're going back again to breath. The idea of life and death. Life has value. It has meaning. How we live enhances or diminishes that curriculum. So it's the idea of passing into a very energetic world or place, however you want to describe that is very energetic in the sense that it's breathing, in the sense that it's the breath of God breathing. It's like there's this activity, this in and out, flash on, flash off. And you get that a lot from science too. And they talk about what we see in the world around us, especially if we're meditating. This flashing on, flashing off. It happens all the time, constantly. There is this on, off, on, off, on, off all the time. What children describe as breathing, what adults often describe as breathing, but what scientists call it's sort of like an on and off light that they can't really identify yet or really describe what that is, but there is that quality of light and dark. When people die, they're met by beings on the other side. Not everybody is, but most people are. And they're most often asked, who did you love? Who did you serve? It's like the rediscovery of life's values. What needs fixing can be fixed. What needs living and who needs loving can be fixed, can be loved. It's like, why do I have a body? What do we need this body for over here then? Because living in the earth plane is easier if you have one. A lot of near-death experiencers come back with a sense of mission. They're told what they have to do. And it doesn't always work. I mean, it's hard, it's difficult. Sometimes it can take a long time to get anything done. Some are not ever able to complete their mission. But there's this one man who came back, and he was told to save the world's tallest, strongest trees. That's his job, save the trees. And to come forth with new ways of healing. And others go into healing, inventors, ministers, teachers. But that one that I talk about in the book about and I give you his name and everything, the guy who was told to save the biggest and the strongest and the most beautiful trees in the world. Fantastic mission that he was given. He's been able to do a lot of it. And, you know, when we're talking about soul and what we're here for, why we're here, I think this one story, all of it true, and made the headlines back in, it's either Boise, Idaho or Twin Falls, Idaho. I forget which town, but it's back in Idaho. I come from Idaho, so it's back there, long before I ever died. And these two girls that were the best of friends, and they were just about ready to graduate from high school. There was a crash. They both died. And I remember it hitting the papers. I mean, the whole town was grieving. And so many turned out for the funeral that they had to turn over the high school gym, you know, to accommodate all the people. Huge amount of people came for the funeral. Massively huge. What very few people know, and I happen to know about it because I was connected with people on the inside, is what happened a year later. A year later, after the girls died. And both of these girls were an only child. So it hit their parents really hard that their only child died just before she could graduate from high school. Both of these girls came back in their mother's vision. Their mother had a very unusual vision, and each girl came back to their mother and explained to their mother why they left. Each one. And the mothers, not, you know, these mothers were not the best of friends or anything. You know, they weren't really even hardly acquaintances. So they were not part of each other's, you know, circle. But both of these mothers knew Johnny Lister, who was an astrologer. And he was called Sun Valley's astrologer, Johnny Lister. But he lived in Boise. And he and I were good friends. And he called me up one day and he says, I can't stand this anymore. I can't stand this anymore. These two mothers are coming to me and they're telling me all about their daughters coming to visit them and telling them why they were killed. He says, what am I going to do? What am I going to do? I says, Johnny, you get a hold of this psychotherapist, this psychiatrist that you know and know well, have him call each of these parents and have the parents come to him all together and explain or open up with the psychiatrist there as to what their daughter had told them in the vision. So he did. He got a hold of this psychologist or psychiatrist, and the guy was game. He called these two families, called them in, and the session happened. And coming out of that session, here's what it was. Both girls knew they were going to die before they graduated from high school. They knew that was the only reason their life existed, was to die, and die violently before they could graduate from high school. Are you getting this? They knew that before they were born, and as they were little kids, they knew they were going to die. The one who was driving had never died before in a violent death. The one who wasn't driving, who was the friend of the one who was, had died numerous times in violent deaths. So she knew how to handle it. So she volunteered to come into this life to help her friend die. Now let that sink in. We're not always here to perform a great mission. We're not always here to necessarily learn what we think we're going to learn. You know, maybe have a family, go to college, whatever. Write a book, become a movie star. Sometimes the only reason we are here is to cap off or finish a previous life, or to somehow add to the growth of the soul, which has nothing to do with what you think in your head or in your mind, but it has everything to do with your soul and how your soul progresses. And in this case, the souls came in only for the purpose of dying at the most special time in any young girl's life, at that moment, to face traumatic death. And that's the only reason they were born, lived, and died the way they did. So when you allow people to just open up, which I did always, near-death experiences, just allow them to open up, you get all kinds of variations to the theme of life and death and what it's all about, Alfie. Yes, there's a heaven. Yes, there's a hell. Yes, there are levels and levels and layers of a hell-like density vibration, a heaven-like faster, more subtle vibration. But interestingly enough, this layer cake of different levels has no top and no bottom. You find this out in research. Nobody is going to rot forever in heaven, and nobody is going to play a harp forever in the one in hell, the other in heaven. It's not going to happen because there's no top and no bottom, which tells me, don't judge. The soul knows what it's doing, and it's comfortable with taking whatever length of time it has or is necessary for the soul to learn what it needs to learn, or act out what it needs to act out, or do what it needs to do. This idea of tunnels is a media myth. You know, in 1982, when the Gallup poll did its first major study, Only 9% of the people ever reported a tunnel. It's now maybe a little bit more than 25%. The average time without vital signs, this is average, is from 5 to 20 minutes with little or no brain damage. In fact, brain enhancement. Most of them come back smarter than they were before, especially with children. And I can give you all kinds of examples of that, but I want to just scurry along here. There are indeed physiological changes in near-death experiencers afterward. It doesn't just change your mind and your way of thinking, what's in your heart of hearts. It literally also changes the physical body. There are changes in brain structure, brain function. There are changes in the nervous system, the digestive system, and skin sensitivity. So we don't just have people who come back more loving, who are no longer interested in this idea of life after death, because they know there is life after death. So, they're not concerned about that. It takes a long time to integrate these experiences. You're not integrated overnight. This idea of medical notes, most people have lower blood pressure afterward, less aging. Isn't that interesting? Less aging. It's as if there's less cortisol in the body, have slower response to stress, often lowers the blood pressure. They have light sensitivity, sound sensitivity, electrical sensitivity, and less tolerance for pharmaceuticals. So you're in a good place, Doc. Tolerance for pharmaceuticals. People can come to you. Right. About that. But the divorce rate is somewhere between 71 to 80%. So it really, really, really changes a person. If you're going to look at these kind of changes, not necessarily through a near-death experience, but the idea of a spiritual or transformative experience, it can have the same energetics. It's a power that somehow pushes. When you go through a spiritual experience, it's a power that somehow pushes. And of course, with a near-death experience, it pushes even harder. And a lot of people call it a soul quake. There is a threshold, a single moment of shift, and it's like the heart decides at the threshold. And everything leads eventually to the same place, and that's oneness. One God, one people, one family, one existence, one law, which is love, one commandment, which is service, one solution to all your problems. It's called forgiveness. Most of the canonized saints by the Catholic Church had an NDE as a child. This is also true for the great psychics like Edgar Cayce, your great inventors, healers, musicians, and spiritual teachers. They had a near-death experience as a child. Do we have time for the big picture? Do we have time left?
Yeah.
We do? Okay. This time quoting from the book. Vocalized or not, you come to know. God is the one presence, the one power, the one force, the one source of all. God has no competitors because no reality exists outside God. God is omnipotent, all-powerful, omniscient, all-knowing, omnipresent, present everywhere. Quite simply, there is no place where God is not. God is neither a man, a woman, or a thing. God is no one's father or mother or benefactor. We use human terms of parentage to help us understand relationships ours to God. Such personal, even neutral pronouns serve as a matter of convenience or because of a need we have for comfort and security. We call ourselves children of God because we don't know what else to call ourselves. And it seems as good a term as any. We are made in the image of God, not in the sense of physical appearance, but respect to the power in our souls and potential in our minds. God is creator. We are co-creators. It would be more appropriate and more in line with truth if we called ourselves extensions of God, or perhaps thoughts in the mind of God. While God is more than name, protocol, hierarchy, concept, or grandiosity, amazingly, God truly is as near as our next breath, as close as our next thought. We are part of God and existent within God. A belief in separation, that we could possibly exist and have our life apart from God, is the greatest of all sins. The belief of separation is of our own making. God has not decreed such a thing. We did this by ourselves, by pretending that somehow, some way, we could transcend that which cannot be transcended. God is not dependent on our belief, for our belief or disbelief in God does not affect God, only us. There is no one religion, just as there is no chosen people or person, nor any single way of regarding what cannot fully be comprehended. We are all sons of God in the sense that we are all souls of God's creation, without gender, without form, without nationality, complete and whole and perfect as we explore the never-endingness of God's wonderment. A spark from the essence that all that God is resides in each and every one of us as an unbreakable connection, thread, or cord that ensures we remain a part of that which we could never leave. The splendorousness, that joy of recognizing and acknowledging our specialness, our greatness as creators of God and as co-creators with God, is akin to being engulfed by overwhelming flood tides of God's glorious love. The greatest fear we have in living out our life on earth is not what might happen to us, but what might be expected from us if we recognize who we are.
That's beautiful. So powerful.
Well, if you get into the book, it gives the child's version and the adult's version, which I didn't get into here. But that's even more in depth. But, all of that on an airplane?
Must have been quite a trip.
Oh,
Get so much information downloaded.
I just had paper flowing all over everywhere. It took a while to put it all together, and took it to a publisher, and he took it right away.
Yeah.
But What's really funny, Dr. Lottie, that book is never sold well. And so I went back to a number of booksellers in different towns, different states, and said, why? Why doesn't this book sell well? And they all said the same thing, because the word God is in it. People won't buy it if it has the G-O-D, that title, as part of the title of the book. And they ignore it because of that. Isn't that something?
Yeah. Yeah, because some people feel, I guess, that there is no God or higher source, or I could see that. Considering I was an atheist before my own near-death experience, I would never have bought that book.
Yeah.
Without having had a near-death experience, because now I know it's just a name. There's just names for what you want to call it, God, or source, or any other godly name.
Yeah, it doesn't matter what we use.
Yeah. So it's been amazing. We're coming up to a close of this podcast, but can you remind people again how they sign up for your newsletter and where they can find your books?
Well, my newsletter is www.pmhatwater.com. That's my that's
Your website.
My website. Just get in there and press newsletter, and you're now at the newsletter. You can sign up to receive it. It just went out, the newest December issue just went out a few days ago. So in that area is an archive. Press the archive and you'll get the December issue. But I mean, you can go back as far as you want, years in fact, in the archive. So you can read as many issues as you want to. But you can sign up to receive it there, and you'll get them from now on. And sometimes I have special announcements that I send out. Sometimes those are appreciated and sometimes they're not. But I warn everybody, the newsletter is only for the curious. And if you're not curious, you probably won't like my newsletters.
It's a great newsletter. It's a great newsletter. And where can they find your books? Are they available online? Amazon?
Anywhere books are sold, they can get them, or you can get them from me and you'll get them autographed. But anywhere books are sold, yes, you can get my books. And also this newest one, it's the Animal Light series, and you can only get that from Amazon. Animal Light series, and it's a series of 6 little books for children. It's animals, and it takes the animals from being in the light, and they come into their mommy and into the womb, and they're formed in the womb, and then later born or miscarried, or they go through different kinds of things. And the purpose of these books is so parents can sit down with their kids and laugh and cry and discuss what's in the books, and then they can say to their little kid, did anything like what happened to Busy Betty Wiggles ever happen to you? And so they can begin to probe then their child's memory. What do you remember from your birth? Well, they probably go blank blank unless you've got something like these little books. And they get in with the hedgehog, or they get in with the little skunk and say, oh yeah, that happened to me. And so you can start then that conversation with children, especially little ones, about maybe what they remember.
Wow, that's a wonderful way of opening that conversation with a young child.
Yeah.
So again, her website is pmhatwater.com, and her newsletter is full of fascinating facts and things coming up and things that are just happening in the world. So it's a fun newsletter. to read. So go sign up for that. And her books, again, are available everywhere online and in bookstores, as well as Amazon.com. So again, I want to thank you so much, P.M.H, for joining us today on the show and sharing your wisdom with the listeners. It's always a pleasure to have you on the show, and I hope to have you back once again and talk about one of the topics in one of your other books.
Okay, my dear. Thank you very, 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 very much. Bye-bye.
Bye. I hope you enjoyed listening to this episode of Dr. Lottie, Science with Soul. Make sure you are subscribed so you will be notified of new episodes as they become available. To book a session with me, or to sign up for a workshop, or to see me as a physician, please visit drlottie.com or divinespiritualessence.com. My book, Med School After Menopause, The Journey of My Soul, is available online at Amazon as well as other online platforms worldwide.